Hello and welcome back. This is going to be part 2. I'm going to go right in and try to keep this a little bit shorter than last time because I do tend to ramble on a little bit. So, I'm not going to go over every type of mate because, first of all, it's been well explained in other places, and you can also just see for yourself by using the little play icon and change the mate type and see how that affects the possible movement. So, I do want to talk about the pin slot because it's the most interesting, and it does have, it's the most common example of when you might have to edit the explicit mate connector created by the mate as discussed in the last video. So let's look at an example. So let's say I'm going to insert a 20mm bolt in this assembly, and I've got a slot with a diameter or width of 25mm. So let's do a pin slot mate from this mate connector that's part of the bolt. And here I'm going to use shift to make sure I can grab my mate connector here. And as you can see, obviously it's not going along the slot. And to do that, you have to edit the mate connector to realign the secondary axis to be parallel to the slot. Now, if I go back in here and edit the mate, now it's traveling along the slot. And you can set limits for the length of the slot so that it only moves as far as you want it to. So that's the kind of standard scenario, and that one is covered fairly well in the help. One trick you can do, because as you can see, this is a 20mm bolt in a 25mm slot. So in the real world, slots are going to be a bit sloppy. There's always going to be some play in there. And you can actually simulate this quite easily. So if you go in here and change the mate type to a planar mate, and basically now it's gonna go off in space off the slot, but you can set limits for the maximum and minimum. So you could go, I guess I've got 5mm both ways. So sorry, 2.5 I guess is what I meant to type. And now it's a bit hard to see in here, but now my bolt can basically move in a rectangle in here. So if you had a bit of a mechanism or something with slots and you want to see how the slop in the slots affects the how it can move, that's a good way to do it. Do note, however, that there is a significant performance penalty to using limits. You can see it doesn't drag quite as smoothly. Well, it might be hard in recording, but limits are expensive to solve. So if you have a big assembly with a lot of moving parts, only do this if you actually need to look into it. And one thing that's also good to know is you can go back and edit it and turn it back into a pin slot. You don't have to delete it or even suppress it. You can just change it, and then this will solve faster. And if you don't need the limit on the length either, don't include it. If you have something else limiting how things are going to move, just be aware of the performance impacts of using limits. But the neat thing is that it will have remembered the other settings. So if you turn it back on, if you want to go back and check something, you can edit it, turn it back to a planar, and it will have remembered the limits. So that's a kind of a power move to change the mate type back and forth depending on what you want it to do. And you could even, if you had multiple pin slot relations in your model, you could define a variable for the play, how much slop, and use it in the limits so that you could see the impact of varying this across a whole bunch of mates all at once. So anyway, that's my tip of the day. change a pin slot to a planar if you want to simulate slop in your slots. And I think I'm gonna keep it at this today, keep it a bit shorter, but I'll be back with some more.